Hello and welcome to the Property Management Show. I'm your host, Alex Osenenko. My day job is the CEO of Fourandhalf, a marketing company that works exclusively with fee-based property management companies. I spent the last 7 years of my life helping property management companies become more successful by improving sales, marketing, and operational efficiency. On this show, we'll deconstruct success into its key components and invite subject matter experts to help you improve every facet of your business. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy the show. So the topic today is how to scale a property management business through a pay-per-click or pay-per-lead method. So we'll explain that in just a moment, but I do want to introduce my guest. He's, in fact, a co-host or a resident expert on anything to do with sales, but he's got a few more tricks up his sleeve. And specifically, this gentleman here, he runs a company called ManageMyProperty, but I would let him explain more details about it and kind of really ease us into what the whole pay-per-lead world. Because personally, we've been running pay-per-click, which is Google AdWords campaigns for our customers for years now, and we have lots of experience. But pay-per-lead is where my guest's expertise lies as well. So he is the CEO of LeadSimple. His name is Jordan Muela. Jordan, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Alex. Thanks for the intro.
And thanks for joining for the show. Sorry to interrupt. So go ahead and kind of walk us through a little bit about the ManageMyProperty.com, what it does, what it stands for, and what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got my start in the industry working for a venture-backed Homeowners Association company way back in 2007. And then from that, we decided to eventually start a business that was selling leads. It's a pay-per-lead model, and that business is called ManageMyProperty. Ran that for a number of years, and then eventually started a second company that provides sales software called LeadSimple.
Gotcha. So ManageMyProperty, that's exclusively for property management companies, right? Is it only residential property management leads, or do you deal in other types of leads?
That's 90% of it. There's a small portion where it's association, multifamily, but the vast majority is SFH.
Gotcha. So for myself, I see some consistencies with companies being very, very successful with this pay-per-lead, pay-per-click strategy. And I see some companies, let's say, being more reserved about going out there and buying leads. And I've actually created a list of 5 kind of common traits that make companies very, very successful with the pay-per-lead, pay-per-click model. And I've asked Jordan to put together his list. So we're going to go ahead and compare our notes live here on the show and see if there are what we can come out with on the other side. And hopefully our listeners can get an idea on if they're looking to start to buy leads or pay per lead. They'll fish out some good ideas from here. So why don't you open up, Jordan? What is the first reason why people are successful with pay-per-lead?
So I think the first thing is the folks that understand what they're paying for. In general, within the pay-per-lead space, there's a high volume of churn. And what I mean by that is that there tends to be a smaller number of companies that stay with it, are very dominant, have a really great strategy and excel, and then a lot of other companies that will come into the market, do it for a period of time, and either determine that they can't afford it or it doesn't work, etc. And so that disparity definitely does merit having some understanding. But really, folks that are succeeding, they know what they're paying for. They understand this is an opportunity to make a sale, not guaranteed actual sales results. And this is nothing like getting referrals. For a lot of folks that are just getting started, many small businesses don't get past the referral stage. Referrals are fantastic. We want to optimize that and get as many as possible. But at the end of the day, that is not a push-button lever or a mechanism to get leads on demand. And so when we want to scale the business, we've got to explore the scary world of paid marketing. Pay-per-lead is one of those options. One thing to understand is how the bidding model works. Different companies have different models. Most have bidding models. The bidding model is typically either going to be a first price or a second price auction. A first price auction is where you bid $10 and you pay $10. A second price auction is where you bid $10 and you pay up to $10, but the system will manage your bid to keep it as low as possible while still maintaining the best possible rank. Those are two pretty different systems. One is not better than the other. But with either of those systems, the thing to be aware of is that with a lot of pay-per-lead services, we're talking about a paradigm where that lead is going to go to more than one vendor. You have a consumer going to a site, seeing a list of companies, considering who they would like to contact, and more often than not, just like we would be with any purchase you make, you want to talk to more than one company. This is a huge asset and investment, and so you're cognizant of the fact that it would be nice to get quotes from more than one company. Now, for some property managers, that either may come as a surprise or be somewhat disappointing, as ideally you're wanting an exclusive lead, but that just isn't how it works. And that's really not the end of the world, but it does make it a little bit more competitive. And so how that relates to the ranking that we mentioned before is that it may not necessarily be the highest ROI to bid yourself all the way to the top of the list. Imagine that there's 10 companies in a list, and the person, any given consumer that contacts somebody on that list is most likely going to contact 3, 4, maybe up to 5 companies. If that is the case, if you're anywhere within the top 4, 3 spots, you're most likely going to get a high percentage of those leads without necessarily paying top dollar. So I think it's really healthy and makes a lot of sense to actively manage your bidding strategy. And just the last thing I would say on this point is that a lot of folks will ask us, how well do leads convert? What is the conversion rate? And it's a real misnomer to think there's any kind of universal stat that can be provided that is meaningful. Because the truth is, the range of conversion is in general somewhere between 5 and 40%. And with that kind of a range, those numbers mean nothing. What that basically means is that it's up to you. It's how well you do with the leads. And a lot of folks that don't end up succeeding with pay-per-lead tend to feel like, oh, it was the lead source. It didn't work. It didn't convert well. But the truth is, commenting on whether or not pay-per-click, pay-per-lead, mailers, radio works requires having a sufficient sample set to actually judge and have an informed opinion about that. And on the whole, all of the marketing channels that I just mentioned do work. It's a matter of having a good process and being able to actually efficiently close those leads. So that's what I would say out of the gate.
Gotcha. So the pay-per-click works in a similar way, except it does not necessarily automatically, and that's not at all, goes to other competitors. So what happens is property managers would bid on a position on the Google page for a particular search. For example, Memphis property management. You can bid a top spot, let's say $5 per click. You get that click. Now from there's not a lead. A click goes to the landing page or to your website, and then you hope from there you earn a lead. Now that's, a consumer has a little bit of time to research and find out and read what you got, maybe watch a video, look at reviews, and then make a decision whether they want to contact the property manager. But essentially, it's a similar tactic in the way that it's paid for marketing. This is not a referral-based business. This is a scalable solution. And I'd say number one reason why our most successful customers make it work with pay-per-click is their understanding of unit economics. In other words, at the end of the day, if you're willing to pay $500 for a revenue stream of $7,000 over the lifetime. So the lifetime value of the customer can be $7,000, can be $5,000, can be $20,000, right? Depending if it's a complex or if it's multiple properties, it's one house. But let's say the average lifetime value of your customer is $5,000. And if you pay $500 to acquire that customer, the unit economics work out quite well. But there's something to be said for the difference here. There, as you said, there are some companies that's been around. In fact, there's one in our building. They've been around since the 70s, and they've never advertised once. So from 1970, this generational change, the business is run by the son now. They're up to, say, 1,000 units. I don't know exactly. But I also have companies who've achieved 1,000 units in 4 years. right? So that's that kind of a how aggressive you want to get, or how much of a growth you're looking for. And that's why we're talking about scaling the business. This is really not your sustainability strategy. This is not you don't use pay-per-lead to stay in business. You use pay-per-lead or pay-per-click to scale and grow and execute your marketing plans. So that's my number one. What do you got for number two, Jordan?
Well, before we move on, I would just say, at the end of the day, it's a lifestyle decision. Different companies have different goals. Some people are happy to keep it as a one-man show, as lean, as efficient as possible, and other people have significant growth ambitions. So it really is just, your own personal goals as a company. There's no value judgment either way, but you certainly have to be realistic based on what your goals are. So the second point with pay-per-lead on why we see some folks have radically better results comes down to response time, meaning how long does it take for you to actually respond to a new inbound lead. And the thing to keep in mind with pay-per-lead is that the whole business model is you are charged per inquiry. And so to facilitate that, you cannot receive inbound phone calls, or at least, nobody thus far is providing any inbound phone calls. So that lead that you're getting is coming in the form of an email. Maybe you're getting a text message as well. And then from there, it's up to you to respond. And the reality is that if you ask folks, do they think that responding to leads is important? The answer is an unqualified yes. If you ask people, do they think that they personally prioritize that? The answer is yes. If you had 100 property managers in a room, you asked them to raise hands, and based on which of them will respond on average within an hour, about 75 to 80% would raise their hand. So most property managers think they respond within an hour. That, we were very happy to accept that assumption until I started running a business that was actually making money selling leads. And then we realized that for some folks, that's not necessarily the case. Let's track it. Let's find out. We actually did some research. We started tracking the leads that we were sending out, a subset of the leads. And what we found is that in aggregate, it was taking on average 39 hours for a property manager, your average property manager, to respond to a new inbound lead. And they were making 1.6 call attempts. Those, as a lead provider, that was not a pleasant stat to uncover.
I can imagine.
That had dire consequences for our business model, and that's actually why we ended up transitioning to software. But the other side of that is that when we actually did a broader study than that, we actually realized that, to get a little bit more precise, less than 6% of companies in any given market will respond to email leads by phone within the first 15 minutes. And the reality is that companies that call within the first 5 minutes versus companies that are calling anytime after a half hour are on average going to be about 2,000% more effective at getting somebody on the phone. That's across the board. But when you look at it specifically with pay-per-lead, you already know that lead is getting sent to more than one company. You already know that these folks are aware of this competition dynamic. So in my mind, it just makes no sense to be paying for these leads and not calling them immediately. So the other side of that is just to think about, if you do that right out of the gate, a lot of times when you're calling somebody immediately and you're having a good conversation, you're keeping them on the phone, keep them on the phone, keep talking. Eventually you should hear one of your competitors trying to beep in the background. That's typically a good sign.
Yeah.
So just the way I think about it, to actually make this happen is that there has to be some kind of an actual process and ideally some technology involved. There has to be a formal lead distribution process, meaning if in-house you know that when a lead comes in, you look at it and you hand it out to one of two agents, that can't be a decision that you are cognitively making every time a lead comes in. That's just a recipe for disaster. If the lead distribution logic is any more complicated than it going to you and you responding, you need to have some systems in place to distribute those leads. And secondarily, even if it is just you that's the primary salesperson, you need to have a backup person. Now, a lot of people will resist this and say, no, I'm the primary salesperson, I know how to represent my company, etc. That's fine. But at the end of the day, when that lead comes in from your pay-per-lead provider, if you are not available, in a perfect world, every single time you are not available, your secretary, your admin person, whoever, is calling that lead and saying, hi, I just want to let you know we got your contact. Thanks so much for reaching out. Dave is going to be calling you back shortly here, but I just wanted to say hello and schedule a time to talk.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Okay, tell me why.
And part of because we record hundreds, in fact, thousands of phone calls through our pay-per-click campaigns, right, through the call rail, because we want to monitor quality and make sure, we can help our customers, get real when it comes to selling and help them, improve their sales process. So what we hear time and time again is if the answering service or someone less competent gets to the lead first, it usually not a pleasant conversation, because here's the thing. You get in the mind of a person that is calling for a property manager. What do you think they have in their mind? There's probably a fire, or there's a big need. They have specific questions. They're in the right frame set of their mind. They need answers to their question. They have very specific questions. A lot of times they get very deep into, what should I do with my bad tenants, or have somebody do an inspection on the property right now. Are they allowed in, or there's all these other questions. So I feel like it's tough. It's tough to have somebody less experienced reach out just for the sake of reach out. Do you not agree with that?
Well, so I would say let's get a little bit more specific. The first thing is, when I'm talking about responding, if we're talking about a call center, absolutely, that's very concerning. A call center that handles your business, as well as plumbers, as well as attorneys, as well as construction companies, that's just a recipe for disaster in general, having somebody like that represent your business. What I'm talking about is somebody that works in your office where they have a very limited scope of response. This is not, hey, field all questions, have freewheeling, have a general conversation. The sole goal is to call this person, introduce yourself, say thanks for contacting us, and to schedule a time for the primary sales agent to have a call.
Okay.
And if this person is in your office, they're going to know if you're going to be tied up for the next 3 hours. And the advice that I'm giving is specific to pay per lead. You can maybe fudge on this a bit more for an inbound call. It's referral. It's generated from SEO traffic off your website. But with pay per lead, it's so competitive. There's already 3 other people calling that lead that's why it's really more of a do or die kind of proposition.
Right, I got you. But I think the consumer picks on merit, picks on experience, picks on how they're able to answer the questions. And even if the phone call potentially schedules another call, I feel like there's still the opportunity to connect is lost. Someone else will connect. That's why my number 2, actually, Jordan, is besides getting back to the leads fast, having a competent and dedicated sales team in place, ready to process those phone calls. Specifically, I find people fall in a trap of, that salesperson is just sitting there. Why don't we make him do some owner reports? Or why don't we make him do some marketing for us? Why don't we make him do some blogs for us? Why don't we make him do this and that? And then you end up loading your salesperson with those low value tasks that you feel need to get done, and they just can't get to the phone at the right time. And then, we have all around performance issues. So,
or vice versa, right? Having the property manager field sales.
Right. Having property manager field sales, don't get me started on this. I hear a lot of phone calls, and the property managers are excellent, and they do fantastic job managing properties. A lot of times they're so emotionally invested in their accounts. Right. But once somebody new gets in, they're almost like a stranger that they didn't want to talk to. I feel like these property managers, they love their portfolio so much, they know everybody, and this stranger comes in, asks them about, managing a property, and it's kind of the prospect, I feel, has to do as much selling as a property manager in that property manager's eye. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from on that.
It is interesting. So
it's a mental orientation in my mind. At the end of the day, it's very difficult to fundamentally switch 2 completely different tasks. Task switching, it just comes with a price, no matter what the tasks are.
Right. And the problem here is some smaller companies don't have opportunities to hire, or at least they don't think they have the opportunities to hire business development dedicated reps and sales reps. But in my book, a salesperson is an asset on your balance sheet.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. The challenge, I hear this all the time, and the challenge is people asking, well, I want to buy a half a salesperson. I need a quarter of a salesperson.
Yeah.
And I get that, and that's challenging. I don't necessarily know that I have the answer there, but I hear you.
We might at some point. But let's go ahead with and figure out the point number 3. Like, we aligned on the second one for sure. So what's the third most important reason people are successful using pay-per-lead service in property management?
It comes down to having a compelling offer. So when somebody is reading about your business within a list, right, within the context of a list of companies, you have to stand out. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the prospect and think about, I feel good about my services. I'm doing my best. But if I was in the shoes of a prospect, how would I be thinking about what is different about what we do? In what way are we going to stand out? And there's so many different dimensions in which this can happen. But let me tell you where it's not going to be. It's not going to be, we have the best service. We love our customers. We are number one in our market. Those phrases mean absolutely nothing. We hear it over and over and over again. But it's kind of like back in the day. Remember the original kind of, when the internet was new, there were these banners on the sides of websites, and they were kind of annoying. You'd look at them. And then eventually what happened? People developed what's called banner blindness. You literally can't see the things that are so familiar and similar anymore. It's the same thing with offers and advertising. And so the offers come down to two things. There's the pricing offer, which is monetary, and then there are risk type offers, which is basically a hedge against you bearing risk. There's crossover between the two. And there can also be content type offers. So with the pricing offer, this would be anything from you saying there's 1 month free, or that you give a discount on the first 3 months, or that you're going to reduce the fee, etc. The point here is not to necessarily nail down what works for your business. That's a question for you. But the point is that there is flexibility. There's a million ways to slice and dice and move fees around. My recommendation is to always have something that you can give when necessary, to always have some kind of a price concession that is small, nominal, but allows people to feel like that they have gotten a deal, and that ideally is not you reducing your overall fee, because that is a long-term give that's going to cost you a ton of money. So have some kind of a financial give that you can give on the front side if asked. Flat fee management is very popular right now. We're seeing a big trend towards that across the board. Again, can't say if that's right for your business, but it certainly is something to consider. Within the other categories, the offers related to risk, we see tenant guarantees, eviction guarantees, et cetera. These are also becoming very popular. Of course, be careful. Do not call it insurance. You cannot provide tenant insurance or eviction insurance unless you actually can, which means that you have jumped through a ton of legal hoops, et cetera. So that's something to be careful for. But at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, is having compelling offers to stand out and to actually get people to hit submit.
Gotcha. Well, so we're kind of aligned on all those elements, because I think it's very similar. Pay-per-click, pay-per-lead is similar methodology for growing your business, and so the success elements are similar. My number 3 is, by the way, I completely agree with yours, and I think this one kind of echoes it in a way. Successful companies always have stellar online reputation. Pay-per-click is a little bit different. They get a chance to dig in a little bit, right? They get a chance to look at the reviews, and that's the job of your pay-per-click marketer, is to make sure all those reviews, all the goodness that is online, that is not what you said, but other people said about you, is presented on that landing page, a page where the consumer goes when they click your ad. Okay, that page needs to be specifically designed to convince them that you're the best. So I would say online reputation is number 1 within this realm, and the second is clearly and well-developed value propositions. So I don't necessarily think you have to have a special, although that helps conversion. You're absolutely correct. But I've seen people do very well without them if they're actual showing their Yelp and Google reviews in multitude, and their actual real reviews when people read them, and also clearly established value propositions. In other words, when you go critically review your landing page, the answer, why should I hire you, should be very clear, right? And if that answer is clear and the special offer is in place, you'll convert more than anyone else. Your cost per lead will go down significantly. Your cost per contract, right? Cost per lead and cost per contract. So that is my number 3. So let's go and see. Unless you have
Yeah, so I would just say about that is that you're so right. Reputation is such a big deal, and we live in this strange era where now your reputation literally has a numerical assignment to it, right? What a new paradigm we're in, but that is absolutely the way that it works. What I didn't mention was brand. I feel like brand is kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but it's a very similar concept. In a perfect world, you have a fantastic brand. People see it and they feel something. That's much harder to do. It's beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but couldn't agree more. The intangibles matter so much.
Yeah, so brand actually emphasizes more stable, in the company in the business with more resources. Reputation actually can be earned within a year,
True.
with some hard work, focus on customer. I know some young companies that obsessively focus on customer experience, and their competitors are just baffled. Oh, what's going on? Why this company all of a sudden is 800 units within 3 years? Well, have you called them? Somebody actually picks up the phone, right? Every time. And that is, but by the way, the old school of doing business is also picking up the phone. And that's great. Those old school companies, they do fantastic job if they don't move away from their principles, from their core values. So we've seen those, but there's some in the middle who put less emphasis on customer experience and more emphasis on everything else that matters less. And when the customer doesn't have a good experience in general, it's hard to get online reputation. You will be eaten up by bad reviews. This is the time we live in. So it's tough to run a business, but it's not as tough to run a good business. Don't you agree?
Absolutely, yeah. The reputation that you just talked about is such a big equalizer. You could have companies that's been around for 100 years, several $1 million in annual marketing budget, and their reputation could be half of a small upstart that's really aggressively paid attention to it. So totally agree.
Yep. So that's the ultimate equalizer. All right. So hit me with your number 4.
My number 4 is leveraging lead nurturing, and I want to kind of segue into this by talking about the lead refund policy with pay-per-lead providers. With pay-per-lead, with pay-per-click, what are you paying for? You're paying for leads. You're paying for closed business, ultimately. That's ultimately what you're paying for, is closed business. If it doesn't result in closed business, you're going to stop paying for it.
Right.
But with pay-per-lead, people are more attuned to the lead as being the deliverable, as opposed to clicks, which is the case with pay-per-click. And so because of that, there's more of an expectation of the lead didn't work out, or they said they already hired somebody else, it was no good, asking for a refund. And a lot of pay-per-lead providers have some kind of a lead refund policy. Some of them are big sticklers. The biggest pay-per-lead provider out there, which is not ManageMyProperty. All Property Management is definitely they stand solid on their lead refund policy, and they're not going to just refund every lead that doesn't work out for you. You have to accept that and understand that on the front side. But the reason this is relevant is because being on the side of it, of seeing these lead refund requests that come in and having that come right out of our bottom line, what do? We follow up. We follow up with the lead to figure out if they were contacted, were they happy, does this person exist, does the number, if I try and call them, go directly to a busy signal as was reported, et cetera. And in doing those follow-ups with a lot of the leads that are refunded, we hear all kinds of things. One is, never called me. Nobody ever called me. I'm angry at you, at your directory, because I submitted my information and nobody ever called me. Well, what does that mean? Well, they probably never did get a call, and sometimes people are just like, well, it's a couple of weeks later, nothing's going to happen. Let me see if I can get a lead refund request or credit. But the truth is that the average number of phone follow-ups that we see when we studied it was 1.6 follow-up attempts by phone. That is abysmal. That's terrible. There has to be a good follow-up process in place. And so when I say lead nurturing, I'm really talking about 2 things. I'm talking about having a clearly defined, written down, documented follow-up policy. Not your best intentions, not shooting from the hip, but something that's actually written down. And maybe you don't do it 100% of the time, but at least write it down and do your darndest to actually abide by that. That's going to allow you to formally define what good follow-up looks like and hopefully to some degree hold yourself accountable to it. That's in the short term. In the long term, meaning after 14 days, that initial 14-day window, that's what everybody is focused on. Every person that gets that lead from that pay per lead provider is hounding that lead. They're salivating. They're ready to go to war within the first couple days. And then very quickly, the enthusiasm kind of dies down. And after 2 weeks, people just write these leads off, right? You paid for the lead. You bought it. It's yours. If you're keeping them and nurturing them over time, you're building an asset. But most people rather just take them and throw them right in the trash can. So after that initial 14-day window, there has to be an ongoing follow-up process. It's in large part going to be automated. It's going to be you sending out emails that are interesting, engaging, compelling, actually things that somebody would want to read. This is not you following up every month saying, would you like to buy now? Are you ready to buy? Etc. This is you educating consumers, providing value, providing some combination of information, education, entertainment, etc. And what I love about this is when you think about that monthly budget that you're spending on pay-per-click, you're spending on pay-per-lead, it goes out the door and then it is gone. Maybe it provided you some leads, maybe it didn't, hopefully it did, but it's done for. When you build and structure a lead nurturing process, it does cost money. But it's a one-time investment that you can amortize over the lifetime of that asset, which will provide dividends for years and years and years. So I can think of no higher ROI than building a lead nurturing program in your business, and that will apply for pay-per-lead, pay-per-click, anywhere you're getting leads from. That's my number 4.
Wow, that's a pretty good one. So lead nurturing, of course, is something that Fourandhalf and LeadSimple partnered on, and we're running this program. We have just been seeing it just started. I mean, we have incredible feedback from mutual clients, of course. But what we'll do is, in the interest of the audience, we'll actually offer a free sales process book download in the notes of this show, so folks can actually formalize their follow-up process and very, very simple 4-step sales process. And the book does not sell; it really just provides information. So we'll give people access to it. So I agree with you 100%. Lead nurturing is, it's that exact thing. It's the asset that pays out dividends, and the longer you have it, the more people you have that opt in, that listening, that watching, that are following you, the more business you will close. But no, my number 4 is a little different. Actually, this is where we deviate a bit, because I actually feel that I see more and more companies being more successful with pay-per-click through increasing their lifetime customer value. So folks that have complementary business units, maintenance, construction. A lot of these, general contractor part of the business, so they want to rehab the house, they want to, turn over the house between the rentals, and they make a lot of money that way. Real estate sales, investor services, those are the complementary businesses that increase the lifetime value of the customer, thereby providing much more favorable unit economics. So these guys that can squeeze $20,000 per customer in a lifetime versus 7 are higher bidders. They're willing to pay more per acquisition, so they will they'll outshine the competition at any given day. So I feel that number 4 is complementary business units that allow you to make more money for each contract.
I couldn't agree more. The thing I would say about that is another way to increase your lifetime value is to have a better process for getting referrals out of your clients, for consistently getting reviews from your clients, and consistently also being aware of services that you can provide tenants as well. So there's a lot of opportunities there, and I couldn't agree more that the companies that we see really crushing it, aggressively bidding, are the ones that can name down to the dollar what their customer lifetime value is. They calculate it, they believe in it, and they bank on it.
Gotcha. Perfect. All right, so let's see if we align on number 5. What is the 5th most important reason for you, Jordan, that you think customers are being successful with pay-per-lead strategy?
It actually kind of segues back on the last thing I just said, and it is tracking. It is choosing to be disciplined and knowing what's working and what's not. And at the end of the day, it comes down to just that. It is tracking. So when these leads are coming in from any given lead provider, first, do you know where they came from? With pay-per-lead, that's easy. With pay-per-click, if you are using a landing page, if you have a tracked phone number, that is easy. If you're not, A, you're making a big mistake, and B, we can't know where these leads are coming from. And this one kills me. Did you have anything to say about this, Alex? Because I looked just recently. I mean, I've known this historically, but I was looking for doing a project related to some other content I was writing. I had a very hard time clicking through the search results and finding folks that are using landing pages. Obviously, those landing pages convert, but it's huge for tracking. Why is this not more popular? Why do more people not use landing pages?
I can tell you why. You talk about property management specifically, or you?
Yes.
Okay. So a couple things. There's few misconceptions out there that I think it's too expensive, or a company like Fourandhalf who focuses on property management. I mean, let's just face it, we can afford to give a price point that is significantly lower than any other company who does not understand property management business. So it's economies of scale for us. But it is the perception out there is it's too expensive to have a purpose-built landing page, or like essentially a purpose-built website for my pay-per-click campaign. But not only that, it's actually building the page, right? So, okay, like I have a designer that can build my page. What do I put in it? Like all these conversion optimization metrics and studies out there, you got to know what you're doing. You got to know how to write out your value propositions, how to put reviews in there. So essentially, it comes down to, it's much easier to just not do it. Right. Huh. It's just much easier to hope for the best. I'll send them to my website. Let's hope it converts. I found myself in the same shoes before in my previous businesses and my previous experiences. You default to the easy method. But yeah, I'm with you on this. Can I come up with my number 5, or do you have some to add?
I just have a little bit more to add there. So, I mean, fundamentally, this is flying blind and burying your head in the sand.
Yep.
And so with that tracking, there's a couple of things that we want to be tracking. The first is how many leads came from this lead source. So if we're not talking about pay-per-lead, that means having landing pages, having tracked phone numbers, and then asking call-ins, how did you hear about us? That is critical. Every person that calls in, you got to ask, how did you hear about us? And then on the backside, tracking your conversion rate. This is another one of those numbers that people love to speculate on and hate to actually track. So I interact with folks on a regular basis that will say, oh, I'm closing 80% of my leads. And it's like, okay, well, that means you're not advertising, basically. There's no one that is doing paid advertising and is closing 80% of the leads that they're getting. It just isn't realistic. Best in the business, people are closing, around 40% when advertising at scale. You could close 80% of your referrals. That's fantastic, but that's not really germane to what we're talking about. So tracking your conversion rate, getting serious about tracking which lead sources are working, which are not on a per lead basis, and tracking your follow-up process. This is so critical and so important that you track how quickly are we calling people back, how many follow-up attempts that we're making, and when things are breaking down, what's going wrong in terms of those elements. We have to have an activity-based model when we're talking about sales. We can't say that it's voodoo. We can't say that it's skills from on high that some people have, some people don't. It's personality. It's all these things. It has to be an activity-based model where there can be accountability built into what we're doing, and all of that requires tracking. And obviously, to do that, you need to be using some kind of a CRM system. You need to be using some technology that's going to allow that to happen without it requiring you to jump through a million hoops and basically be a glorified Post-it note. That's what I got there.
That's perfect, perfect, Jordan. I agree with you 100%. I actually mine just amends yours a little bit. My number 5, basically why companies are successful with pay-per-click, pay-per-lead is, these companies have a marketing plan and dedicated budget for portfolio expansion. Like these guys are ready to accept scale and growth. Some companies dabble, right? They dabble in this and they're like, get few leads, and then it didn't work out for me. It's terrible. I tried pay-per-click 5 years ago, and it was terrible, never worked for me. Well, right. There's so many elements with it's like I tried a car before and it was terrible, so I'll never buy a car again because this was a big Cadillac, and I won't touch a car. But there's such a variety of cars out there that big Cadillac experience that you didn't like, it's not necessarily relevant to what's out there today. So, but like the companies, besides having a system for tracking or a plan for tracking things, and actually being able to review their results and improve on their results, and invest money in specific channels where they make the most ROI or return on investment, they actually have a plan in place. And when you ask these guys, how many properties do you want to get next year? It's like, well, we're actually setting up for about 150 next year. We feel like we might get to 200, but I will accept 90. Here's all the things that we're doing to get there. People who are not as successful with pay-per-click, they really don't have the vision of what they want to get at. They're like, well, I'll be happy with 50, but maybe 6. They're unsure yet. They haven't really put the plan together. So I think that's a differentiator for me from what I've seen.
Absolutely, yeah. The question is growth optional? If growth is optional for you, then you're going to get optional results. If it's not optional, then there's going to be accountability, expectations, and a real push and drive to make it happen.
Hey, that was great, actually. So I appreciate all your wisdom, Jordan. I'm looking forward to have you on our in the future episodes as well. You and I have another good topic that we're going to discuss. Any parting words for our listeners?
Yeah, so parting words are just to always test, experiment, don't be content, try new things, always explore and see what works. I think there's so much room for expansion, so much potential for companies that are working smart and being persistent and willing to experiment. So it's exciting times to be growing a property management company in this industry right now, in my opinion.
That indeed is correct, sir. I agree. Well, let's go ahead and end it here. So, Jordan, where can people find you if they want to go look up your company?
If you want to look up some information about what we do, you can check out ManageMyProperty.com as well as LeadSimple.com. Didn't mention LeadSimple a whole lot, but it is sales CRM technology built specifically for property management companies. That's the main thing I'm working on right now. Love to hear from you.
Excellent. So, until next time, hope you enjoyed the show.
Adios.